She thought my land was just a shortcut. She didn't realize it was my life. I've always been the kind of man who keeps to himself. Up before sunrise, boots crunching on gravel, the smell of dew and earth clinging to the air. My days are measured in simple things: fences to mend, fields to walk, bulls to feed. And though the HOA has been breathing down my neck for years, I usually let their complaints slide. They moaned about my bulls being too loud at night, about the smell of wheat dust after harvest, about fences that ruined the neighborhood aesthetic. I shrugged it off. Life's too short to fight over every little thing. But patience has a breaking point. I remember the first time I saw it. Late afternoon, sun hanging low, painting the sky orange. I was heading out to check the west fence when I noticed tracks cutting through the middle of my wheat field. Not deer, not kids. These were deep grooves, wide and heavy, the kind only an SUV or a golf cart would make. My wheat, weeks from harvest, flattened into ugly scars that stretched from one end of the property to the other. I crouched down, ran a hand over the broken stalks, and felt something coiled tight in my chest. I wanted to believe it was kids, maybe joyriding where they shouldn't. But the tracks kept showing up day after day, fresh grooves crushing the green into mud. Whoever it was, they didn't care. And every time it cut deeper, not just into the field, but into me. Weeks later, the truth roared right into my face. I was fixing a gate hinge when I heard the low growl of an engine, too close, too steady. I looked up, and there she was, Karen, HOA president, the self-appointed queen of our little patch of the county. Her shiny crossover barreled through my wheat like it was her private driveway. I waved my arms, stepped into the path until she screeched to a stop, gravel and stalks flying. "Karen," I said, jaw tight, trying to hold on to the last shred of patience I had. "This is private property. You're destroying my wheat. Stay off." She leaned out the window, sunglasses pushed down her nose, and rolled her eyes so hard it nearly echoed. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "It's just grass. This path saves me 10 minutes getting to the main road. You've got so much land. What's the harm?" "What's the harm?" My voice cracked sharper than I meant it to. "The harm is thousands of dollars in crops, and trespassing, that's the harm." Karen smirked, tilted her head like she was in on some private joke. "What are you going to do? Call the cops? The HOA outranks your little farm." That line, those words, burned into me like fire under the skin. Outranks my farm. Like the dirt under my boots, the sweat in my shirt, the long nights and early mornings meant nothing. That's when something inside me shifted. A decision, quiet but solid, like a gate clicking shut. Enough was enough. What Karen didn't know was that my bulls graze right next to that wheat field. And they're not the kind of animals you toy with. Heritage breed, massive shoulders, hooves like sledgehammers, tempers that don't forgive trespassers. And one of them had a reputation. Big Red. He wasn't just a bull. He was a storm given muscle and bone. Protective, territorial, eyes like burning coals under his heavy brow. Usually I kept him penned, calm, content with hay and pasture. But that day, standing in the path of Karen's arrogance, I realized something. Maybe it was time Karen learned this land had rules she couldn't rewrite. That night after the sky turned black and the crickets took over the fields, I stood at the fence line with my flashlight. The gate creaked as I pulled it open, shifting the fencing just enough to let Big Red and his brothers roam a little wider. Nothing unsafe, just freedom. Freedom that happened to cross paths with Karen's shortcut. The air was cool, the stars sharp as nails overhead. My boots scuffed in the dirt as I whispered to Red through the bars. "Tomorrow," I said softly, scratching behind his horn. His breath was hot, heavy, filling the night. Tomorrow she'd learn. And as I walked back toward the porch, each step felt heavier, more certain. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about anger. It was about respect. The kind of respect that land, animals, and hard work demand. And if Karen wouldn't give it willingly, then the bull would remind her in a way no words could. Because sometimes it isn't fences or laws or arguments that draw the line. Sometimes it's something older, wilder, a force that doesn't care about shortcuts or titles or the false power of an HOA. Sometimes it's just a bull named Big Red. She thought the field would bend for her. She didn't know the field had teeth. The next morning, the air was already heavy with heat. I remember the way the screen door groaned when I stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug warm in my hand, steam curling into the pale light. The sound of the cicadas was steady, a kind of buzzing hum that matched the low thump of my boots on the boards. Out beyond the fence line, the wheat swayed, golden and soft-looking. But I knew the scars were there, carved deep across it like insults burned into skin. I checked the gate, still open just the way I'd left it. Big Red stood there, massive shoulders shifting, tail flicking like a whip, head low as he sniffed the morning air. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't waiting. He was ready. And that alone sent a ripple of something through me, half nerves, half justice. I tried to busy myself, hauled buckets, rattled grain, checked fence posts, but my ears never stopped listening for the sound. That distinct, unforgiving crunch of tires over stalks. By late afternoon, the sun was sliding west, shadows stretching, and I thought maybe Karen had decided to take the road like a normal human being. Then I heard it. Crunch, crack, the engine's hum bouncing off the flat open field. My jaw tightened. I set the bucket down slow, dust lifting around my boots, and reached for the binoculars hanging by the door. Through the lenses, there she was, Karen. Shiny crossover cutting across the field like she owned it, stalks snapping beneath her tires. Her sunglasses flashed in the sun as she tapped one hand on the steering wheel, completely oblivious to the world she was about to meet. Big Red saw her before I even tracked him in the glass. His ears twitched, nostrils flaring. He let out a low, rolling bellow that vibrated through the ground, through the soles of my boots up into my chest. It wasn't just sound, it was warning. Karen didn't hear it, not at first. Red's hooves tore up clumps of dirt as he surged forward, muscles moving like a machine older than time. His horns caught the light, sharp and certain, as he barreled across the open stretch. Through the binoculars, I could see the exact moment Karen realized she wasn't alone. Her head jerked, the car swerved, and then she saw him, a freight train made of hide and horn bearing down on her shiny toy. She screamed. I didn't need to hear it. I could see it in the way her mouth opened wide, her whole body jolting. She cranked the wheel hard, but it was too late. Red hit the side of her car with a crack that split the air, metal denting like it was paper. The vehicle fishtailed, tires spinning mud, wheat snapping under the weight. I didn't move from the porch. I didn't shout. I just lowered the binoculars, let the mug of coffee cool in my hand, and watched. Karen floored it, panicking, wheels spitting dirt. But the field wasn't a road. Soft soil, broken stalks, it dragged her speed down. Red circled back, steam puffing from his nostrils, bellow echoing like thunder. He lowered his horns and came again, each stride shaking the earth. She swerved, barely missed him this time, but he didn't stop. He chased her like she was nothing more than a trespasser on his land, which in his eyes she was. Her car bounced, scraped, jolted like a rag doll between her hands, and I couldn't help it. There was a chuckle that slipped out, quiet but sharp. This was the shortcut she wanted. This was the ride of her life. Finally, she managed to angle the car toward the road, bouncing over ruts, scraping through the fence line. Red stayed with her until the last inch, horns just feet from her bumper before he stopped dead, pawed at the dirt, and bellowed loud enough to make the crows scatter from the trees. Karen was gone in a cloud of dust, taillights shaking. Red stood there, proud, snorting, shaking his head like a king who defended his throne. The field went quiet again, save for the cicadas. My heartbeat slowed, though a smile lingered in my jaw. That evening, the phone started ringing. Her voice came through the receiver sharp as broken glass, shrill enough to make my ears ache. Your bull attacked me. He dented my car. You're paying for the damage. I sat at the kitchen table, elbows resting on the wood, looking at the dust on my boots while she ranted. When she paused for air, I said evenly, Karen, you were trespassing, and I've got trail cams recording the whole thing. From the second you cut into my field to the second Big Red chased you out. Every frame. Dead silence. For a heartbeat, I could almost hear her trying to find a way around it. Then came the threats. I'll sue you, I'll take this to the board, you think a bull makes you untouchable. I leaned back in the chair, let the wood creak, and said calmly, go ahead. The sheriff's already seen the footage. He laughed harder than I did. She sputtered, cursed, and slammed the line dead. I stared at the quiet phone. the hum of the refrigerator filling the space, and felt that rare kind of satisfaction you don't get often in life. The kind where justice doesn't need a courtroom or a rule book. Out the window, I could see Red standing tall in the fading light, stalks brushing against his flanks. He'd done what no sign, no warning, no complaint ever could. He'd drawn the line. And I knew one thing for sure, word was going to spread. They say a rumor dies in the dark, but in a neighborhood with an HOA, it spreads like fire in dry grass. By the next morning, I could feel it in the air. Not just the heat rolling off the wheat fields, not just the faint smell of diesel and dust. It was in the way the neighbors slowed their cars when passing, eyes flicking toward my fence line. It was in the awkward nods I got at the mailbox, half respectful, half cautious. Word about Karen and the bull had already slipped through every crack in the community. I didn't need to brag, didn't need to explain. The story told itself. Karen tore through my field again, and Big Red gave her an escort she'd never forget. Still, I knew Karen wasn't going to let it die that easy. Around mid-morning, I heard the sound of heels on gravel, an odd sound for farm dirt. Sure enough, there she was at the edge of my driveway. Karen. Sunglasses hiding her eyes, lips pressed tight, clipboard clutched to her chest like a weapon. Behind her, two other board members lingered, one pretending to check his phone, the other staring at the ground. I stepped out onto the porch, boots thumping on the wood, letting the screen door creak and slap shut. "Morning," I said, though my voice was flat. Karen didn't bother with pleasantries. She jabbed the clipboard forward like she was serving a warrant. "You owe me for damages. My vehicle has nearly $3,000 in repairs thanks to your dangerous animal." I let out a slow breath, crossed my arms, and leaned against the railing. "Funny thing," I said. "The sheriff didn't see it that way, neither did the footage. From where I'm standing, Karen, you were trespassing, repeatedly." Her jaw twitched. She shifted the clipboard higher as though hiding behind it. "You think this little stunt is over? The HOA has rules you agreed to when you bought here. Animals that pose a danger to residents aren't allowed. That bull could have killed me." Her voice caught just a bit at the end, like she wasn't sure if she was outraged or scared. I stepped down one stair, boots crunching the dirt. "You weren't a resident, Karen. You were a trespasser, and Big Red doesn't read bylaws, he reads threats." The two board members behind her shifted, one coughing awkwardly. Karen's face flushed crimson, but I could see something flicker in her stance, a hesitation, a crack. She turned sharp on her heel, muttered something about lawyers, and stomped back to her car. The board members trailed like guilty dogs. By evening, I knew the phone tree had done its work. My neighbor, old Mr. Fletcher, stopped by the fence line while I was hauling hay. He leaned on the post, hat pulled low, and gave a low chuckle. "Heard Karen got herself a wake-up call," he said. "'Bout time someone taught her she ain't the queen of this county." I just shrugged, but inside there was a warmth. Not gloating, not really, more like relief. For once, people were seeing the truth with their own eyes, not just swallowing the board's side of things. Still, I didn't trust the silence. Karen was the kind who smiled when she lost, but sharpened knives in private. Sure enough, 2 nights later, a letter showed up in my mailbox. HOA letterhead, bold black font, the kind that's supposed to look official. "Notice of violation," it read. "Dangerous livestock posing a threat to community safety. Immediate removal of bull required." I stood there under the porch light, letter trembling just slightly in my hand, the cicadas screaming louder than the words. Immediate removal. They wanted Big Red gone. I could feel the anger simmer low and steady, like coals in a pit. Red wasn't just a bull. He was mine. My responsibility, my protector, my reminder of everything this land stood for. They thought they could strip him from me with a piece of paper. I crumpled the letter in my fist, tossed it onto the porch boards, and stared out at the dark field. Out there I could see his shadow, broad, unyielding, moving slow among the stalks. He lifted his head, snorted as if he already knew. That night I didn't sleep much. I lay there, listening to the creak of the house, the distant low of cattle, the faint rustle of wheat in the wind. My mind kept circling the same thought. If they come for him, if they think they can walk onto my land with papers and threats, they're in for more than they bargained. Morning came with a phone call. Sheriff again. His tone was calm, but there was an edge of disbelief. Got a complaint from your HOA? They say your bull's a public safety hazard. I told him about the letter, told him about the footage. He sighed, said, I've seen that bull. He didn't go looking for trouble. Trouble came to him, and between you and me, the county isn't gonna back an HOA over private farmland. Just keep your cameras rolling. When I hung up, I felt the weight ease a little, though not completely. Because Karen wasn't done. She'd never be done, not until she either won or embarrassed herself so badly she couldn't show her face again. And part of me wondered which would come first. That evening, as the sun sank low, painting the stalks gold and fire, I walked the fence line with Red trailing me, his heavy hooves thumping the dirt in rhythm with mine. I reached up, scratched behind his horn, felt the solid weight of him leaning into my hand. Seems they want you gone, I muttered. His ear twitched, his breath hot against my arm. I smiled faintly. But you're not going anywhere. Because sometimes the fight isn't just about land or crops or money. Sometimes it's about keeping the things that give us strength, the things that remind us we don't bow down to arrogance. And Karen was about to learn that lesson the hard way. They thought a letter would scare me. They didn't realize my whole life was built on paper I'd already burned. A week passed. The crumpled violation notice still sat on the porch where I'd dropped it, rain-spotted and faded from the sun. I left it there on purpose, like a warning flag to myself, a reminder that this fight wasn't over. Every time I stepped past it, boots brushing the boards, I felt the knot in my chest tighten and settle deeper. Karen didn't drive past anymore. Not on the road, not through the field. No, she sent others. First, it was the HOA's vice president, Mark, a man with too much gel in his hair and a voice like he thought he was still in high school debate. He came striding up my drive in polished loafers that collected dust with every step. I was at the barn hauling hay when he cleared his throat behind me. You know, he said, the board is unified on this. The bull is a liability. We're offering you a chance to cooperate before this gets formal. I didn't turn around right away, kept stacking bales until my arms burned. When I did, I leaned on the pitchfork and looked him over. Formal? I asked. Mark adjusted his tie out here in 90-degree heat. Legal action. Fines. We've consulted with an attorney. The HOA has jurisdiction over properties within this subdivision. That last word, subdivision, made me laugh out loud. I wiped the sweat off my forehead with the back of my hand. This isn't a subdivision, it's farmland. Been farmland since before your HOA bought their first mailbox. His jaw tightened. He muttered something about me regretting it and walked off, dust coating his shiny shoes. By evening, another letter appeared. This one thicker, stuffed into my box without postage. Printed words, bold and threatening. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and potential seizure of property. I carried it back to the kitchen, dropped it on the table next to the coffee stains, and didn't even bother opening it fully. Seizure of property. They really believed those words could unmake the dirt under my boots, the fields that fed me, the bull that guarded me. Still, their persistence worked its way under my skin. I couldn't stop hearing Karen's voice from that first day. What are you going to do? The HOA outranks your little farm. She said it with such certainty, like she was already holding the deed to my life in her manicured hand. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the shutters, the boards of the old farmhouse creaked, and out beyond the window I could hear Red shifting in the field. His low bellow rolled through the night like thunder, protective, patient, waiting. And I thought maybe I wasn't the only one tired of Karen's arrogance. The next morning I made a decision. I pulled the trail cam footage onto my laptop, the clear video of her crossover tearing through my wheat Red charging, the panic on her face as she scrambled for the road. I burned copies onto 3 DVDs, labeled them plain, trespassing evidence. One went into a safe. Another I delivered straight to the sheriff's office. The third I slipped into the mailbox with no return address, addressed to the county zoning board. If the HOA wanted to play formal, so could I. Days passed. The air thickened with tension. Neighbors kept stopping me in hushed tones, some with sympathy, some just fishing for gossip. One woman, Linda, leaned over the fence while watering her roses and whispered, Karen's been telling everyone you trained that bull to attack, says it's basically a weapon. I looked at Red grazing behind me, tail swishing at flies, shoulders broad as a wall. He doesn't need training, I said quietly. He just needs someone foolish enough to test him. The very next day, 2 men in pressed shirts showed up at the edge of my drive. They introduced themselves as representatives of the HOA legal committee. Their voices were calm, too calm, the kind of calm that hides fangs. "We're here to discuss a resolution," one said, sliding a paper across the hood of his car toward me. "Voluntary relocation of your bull to another property. Failure to agree will result in enforcement." I didn't even touch the paper, just let the wind flutter it. "Enforcement?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "We can't allow an aggressive animal to endanger residents." I stared at him, silent long enough to make him shift uncomfortably. Finally, I said, "Step 1 foot past that fence and you'll see who's endangered, and it won't be Red." They left without another word, but I saw the way their eyes lingered on the field, on the massive shadow moving among the stalks. They knew, they felt it. That night, while I sat on the porch with the old rocking chair creaking under me, I thought about everything that had happened. The field, the letters, the threats. I thought about Karen's smirk, Mark's gel-slick confidence, the lawyer's false calm. And beneath it all, one truth kept pressing in. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't about rules. It was about control. Karen couldn't stand that my land, my bull, my life, all of it, was beyond her reach. She wanted to bend it, own it, claim it as hers the way she claimed her shortcut through my wheat. But some things aren't for sale. Some things don't bow. Out in the field, Big Red lifted his head to the stars and bellowed, the sound shaking the night, sending echoes rolling into the trees. I closed my eyes and let the sound carry me. Because I knew, sooner or later, Karen was going to try again. And next time she'd push harder. She couldn't beat me with letters, so she brought outsiders to my doorstep. It started with the sound of tires on gravel one hot afternoon. Not the heavy crunch of Karen's crossover this time, but a slower, deliberate roll. I wiped the sweat off my brow and set down the fence post I was driving into the ground. When I looked up, a white county truck was easing down my drive, amber lights flicking on top. 2 men stepped out, both in khaki shirts with patches stitched on the sleeves. Animal control. One carried a clipboard. The other scanned the field like he was expecting a monster to leap out of the wheat. "Afternoon," the first one said. His voice was even, but I caught the tightness under it. "We've had a complaint. Dangerous livestock threatening residents. We're here to inspect." I wiped my hands on my jeans, took my time walking over, boots grinding the dust. "Threatening residents?" I asked, letting the words hang. The second man cleared his throat, eyes flicking nervously toward the field. "We were told your bull has attacked vehicles, that he's been roaming unchecked. It's a serious concern." I almost laughed, but the weight of their uniforms kept the humor out of my voice. "You mean Karen's complaint," I said. "Because she left out the part where she was trespassing. I've got trail cam footage. Sheriff's already seen it." The man with the clipboard shifted, uncomfortable. "We still have to check the animal. Standard procedure." I let the silence stretch, cicadas buzzing in the background, the smell of dry earth sharp in the heat. Finally, I nodded toward the pasture. "You can look, but don't step in unless you want him to look back." They followed me to the fence line. Big Red was there, massive and calm, chewing on stalks with the kind of indifference that only comes from knowing he owns the ground he stands on. His hide gleamed red-brown in the sun, horns catching the light like polished ivory. One officer scribbled something on his clipboard, the other muttered, "That's a big animal." I leaned on the fence. "He's a bull. He does what bulls do, protects his herd, his land. He's never left this property, never gone looking for trouble." The clipboard officer cleared his throat. "We don't see any violations here. Contained, healthy, no signs of aggression unless provoked. We'll file our report." And just like that, they were gone, dust trailing behind their truck. But I knew it wouldn't end there. That evening, as the sun sank and the air cooled, I sat on the porch listening to the gate creak in the breeze. The phone rang again. Karen's number flashing across the screen. I didn't answer. Let it buzz until the machine picked up. Her voice spilled into the kitchen, sharp and furious. You think you've won? I'll have the county back. I'll have the state. You can't hide behind that bull forever. I let the message finish, then hit delete. My thumb hovered over the button a moment longer, the silence thick in the kitchen. My chest felt heavy, not with fear, but with exhaustion. Because it wasn't just about a bull anymore. It was about a woman who couldn't stand boundaries, who saw every fence, every rule as something to break if it didn't suit her. The next day, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was stamped with the county seal. Notice of review, livestock nuisance complaint. I sat at the table, letter spread out under my hands, the wood grain pressing faintly into my skin. My breath came slow, steady. I could almost hear Karen's smug voice behind every printed word. She was moving the fight higher, dragging in bigger guns. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if the county sided with her? What if they forced me to move Red, tore him from this land? I looked out the window, saw his silhouette against the wheat, broad and unyielding, and felt the doubt burn away. I wasn't giving him up. Not for her, not for anyone. That night, I made another copy of the trail cam footage. Dropped it off myself at the county office, boots echoing on the linoleum floor as the clerk raised her eyebrows at the disc. Evidence, I told her simply, shows the truth. She nodded, set it aside, and promised it would be reviewed. Driving home, the sky darkened and headlights swept across fields that had stood longer than the HOA, longer than Karen, longer than any paper threat. I rolled the window down, let the night air in, heavy with dust and wheat. By the time I pulled into my drive, Red was waiting at the fence, his breath steaming in the cool night. I got out, walked over, pressed a hand against his massive shoulder. They'll keep coming, I said softly. His ear twitched, his body solid against mine. But so will we. In the distance, I could see lights flicker from Karen's house, bright in the dark like a challenge. She was still scheming, still sharpening her weapons. But so was I. Because sometimes battles aren't fought with fists or lawyers. Sometimes they're fought with patience, with proof, with the simple, stubborn refusal to be pushed off what's yours. And if Karen thought she could outlast me, she hadn't met the man who wakes before dawn every day of his life, who builds fences in the heat, who lives by the rhythm of earth and cattle. She was fighting the wrong neighbor. And soon she'd find out just how wrong she was. The county said they'd review the complaint in 2 weeks. 2 weeks doesn't sound like much, but when you're living under a cloud, every day stretches long and heavy. The mornings didn't change. I still woke before sunrise, still laced my boots and listened to the porch boards creak under me. But the weight was there, hanging in the quiet. Even the bulls felt it. Red paced more, low bellows rolling through the fields, his breath steaming in the cool dawn air. He knew something was coming. Animals always know. By the third day, neighbors started choosing sides. Mr. Fletcher stopped me at the fence line again, hat pulled low against the sun. County won't back her, he said, voice rough with certainty. Seen your footage, everyone's seen it. She brought it on herself. But not everyone thought that way. I saw curtains twitching when I drove past, caught cold stares from people I used to nod at in the grocery store. Karen had been busy, whispering in ears, painting me as the man with a weaponized bull. One afternoon, Linda, Rose Bush's woman, leaned over her fence with a nervous glance. They're saying Red nearly flipped her car, she whispered, that he went after her on purpose. I gritted my teeth. Funny how she leaves out the part where she plowed through my field. Linda nodded quickly, but her eyes flicked away, guilt in her face. She didn't want trouble. Few do. The pressure built each day, like heat swelling before a storm. And then Karen tried something new. It was a Saturday, late afternoon. I was in the barn, hammering a loose plank back into place when I heard a scream. High, sharp, panicked. I dropped the hammer and ran. Through the wheat toward the fence line, I saw movement. A kid, maybe 12, flailing his arms, running in circles. And behind him, Big Red, head lowered, hooves pounding the dirt. My heart slammed into my throat. I sprinted faster, shouting Red's name, whistling sharp. But even as I ran, something felt wrong. The kid wasn't where he should have been. He wasn't near the road. He was inside my fence. inside. Red bellowed, a sound that rattled my bones. The boy tripped, hit the dirt, scrambled on his hands. Red bore down, dust rising behind him like smoke. At the last second, I cut across the field, grabbed the cattle prod from the gate and swung it up. "Red!" I barked, voice cracking like a whip. He skidded, horns gouging dirt, breath bursting hot. For a tense heartbeat, he stared at me, eyes burning. Then he snorted, pawed once and turned away, stomping back toward the herd. I dropped to my knees beside the kid, panting, sweat stinging my eyes. "You all right?" I asked. He was shaking, wide-eyed, his shirt torn, knees bloodied. But when he opened his mouth, his first words weren't fear, they were practiced. "Your bull tried to kill me." The pit in my stomach dropped. By the time I walked him to the fence, Karen was there. Of course she was. Standing just outside, arms crossed, phone raised like she'd been recording the whole thing. "You see," she screeched. "You see what kind of danger he is. This child could have died." My chest heaved, not from running anymore, but from rage. "He was inside my fence," I snapped. "Inside? How did he get in, Karen?" She smirked, the boy shuffling nervously at her side. "Kids wander, bulls attack. That's the story the county's going to hear." I stared at her, fists clenching so tight my nails bit into my palms. Red stood behind me, massive and silent, his breath rolling like thunder over my shoulder. Karen didn't flinch at him, she looked at me, and I realized then this wasn't about Red anymore. This was about breaking me. That night I sat at the kitchen table with the trail cam pulled up again. My hands shook as I scrolled through the footage, frame by frame. And there it was. Karen leaning against the fence with the boy, whispering to him, then lifting the gate herself, sliding it open just enough for him to slip through. The blood roared in my ears. My fists slammed the table, rattling the mug sitting there cold. She hadn't just lied. She'd put a child in danger to stage her evidence. For a long time, I just sat there in the dim light, listening to the old clock tick, the boards creak. My anger came in waves, hot, then hollow, then hot again. Finally, I copied the footage, 3 more discs, one for the sheriff, one for the county, one for myself. The next morning, I dropped them off. The sheriff watched the video with his jaw set tight. "She opened the gate," he muttered. "That's entrapment, endangering a minor. Hell, she could face charges herself." For the first time in weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. Driving home, I saw Karen's house as I passed. She was standing on her porch, arms crossed, eyes sharp as knives, like she knew exactly what I'd done. I slowed just enough to roll the window down, looked her straight in the face. Didn't say a word. Just let the silence between us carry more than words ever could. Because she'd crossed a line, not just into my field, not just into my fight, into something darker, something that left her with no ground to stand on. And if she thought she could still win, she was about to learn what real loss looked like. The letter came in the mail on a Monday, heavy envelope, county seal pressed on the flap. My hands felt rougher as I tore it open, the paper crackling like it didn't want to be read. Inside was the notice. Hearing scheduled, livestock nuisance complaint, attendance required. I knew it was coming. Still, the words tightened something in my chest. The hearing was set for Friday. That gave me 4 days. 4 long days of walking the fields, tightening fences, running my hands over the rough wood, feeling the dust gather on my boots. 4 days of Red packing at the fence line, snorting like he could smell the fight in the air. By Friday morning, the sun was only a pale smear behind thin clouds, but the air was already heavy. I put on my cleanest shirt, the one I usually saved for church or funerals, and brushed the dust off my boots as best I could. Still, they carried the field with them, the smell of earth, the faint cling of wheat. The county building sat low and square, all glass and brick, the kind of place that never feels alive. As I walked through the doors, the echo of my boots on tile felt too loud, like everyone was listening. Inside the hearing room, the air was thick with whispers. Neighbors filled the chairs, some leaning forward, eager for a show, others with tight lips, afraid to be seen choosing sides. Karen sat near the front, sunglasses perched on her head, lips curled in a confident smile. She wore red, bright, bold, like she thought she was the bull herself. When she saw me, she tilted her head almost like a dare. The board called the session to order. Voices shuffled, papers flipped. A county officer read out the complaint, dangerous livestock posing a threat to residents' safety. And for a moment, the words felt heavy enough to tip the room against me. Karen stood first. She painted her picture with smooth strokes, voice trembling just enough to sound believable. She spoke of fear, of danger, of being attacked while merely driving near my land. She spoke of a child nearly gored, of sleepless nights worrying about what could happen next. Each word dripped with practiced outrage, her hands clutching the table like a stage prop. The neighbors shifted, eyes flicking between us. Some nodded at her words, others frowned. When she finished, she sat down with a triumphant glance my way, as if she'd already nailed the coffin shut. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, chair legs scraping against the tile, the sound sharp in the room. My palms were rough against the paper I carried, but I didn't need to read from it. I spoke the way I always had, straight, simple, no polish. I work that land, I said. Every day, every season, that bull, Big Red, he doesn't leave my property. He doesn't go looking for trouble. He protects his herd and his field the way he's supposed to. The only danger he's ever been in is when someone ignored the fences and treated my land like their shortcut. I paused, let the silence breathe, and I've got proof. That's when I set the DVD on the table. The county official slid it into the player. The screen lit up at the front of the room, and there it was, clear as day. Karen's crossover tearing through my wheat. Red charging horns lowered, her car swerving in panic. Gasps rippled through the room. Then the second clip. The boy coaxed to the fence by Karen. Her lifting the gate, slipping him inside, standing back with her phone raised while Red approached. The room went silent. On the screen, Red stopped short at my call, turned away instead of striking. The boy's wide eyes, the dust, the truth, it was all there. When the video ended, the silence stretched so long it rang in my ears. Karen shifted in her seat, her face draining of color. The county official cleared his throat. "It appears," he said slowly, "that the bull was contained at all times. The incidents in question were the result of trespassing and deliberate provocation." He looked directly at Karen. "This board does not recognize the complaint as valid. Further review may be taken regarding false reports." Karen shot up, voice breaking, hands shaking as she pointed at me. He manipulated that footage. You can't trust it. You can't." But no one was listening anymore. Even her own board members avoided her eyes. Neighbors whispered, shook their heads. The show was over, and everyone knew the curtain had dropped. I sat back down, heart pounding but steady, a slow tide of relief washing through me. Not joy, no, this wasn't joy. It was something heavier. Vindication, maybe. The kind that tastes like dust and sweat, like the truth standing on its own legs. When the session adjourned, I stepped outside into the pale afternoon light. The air smelled faintly of rain, the clouds breaking into strips of blue. I took a long breath, filling my chest, letting the weight slip just a little. Karen stormed past me on the steps, her heels clacking sharp on the stone. She didn't look at me, not once. But I looked at her, and I thought, she's not done, not really. A person like that doesn't back down because of shame. She backs down only when she's stripped of every weapon. And maybe, just maybe, she was almost there. Out in the distance, beyond the county's glass and brick, I could almost see the fields waiting. The wheat, the fences, the shadow of Big Red packing like a king. And I knew one thing for certain, no board, no hearing, no false words would ever take that from me. Because land remembers, bulls remember, and so do I. Some battles end in a hearing room. Others end when the truth walks out with you into the daylight. But with Karen, it wasn't over that Friday. Not yet. I thought maybe shame would quiet her, maybe silence would finally settle her storm. But by Monday morning, the neighborhood was buzzing again. Rumors spilling like weeds in the ditch. Some said Karen was planning to sue me personally. Others whispered she was stepping down from the HOA board. And some swore she'd been seen driving past my place at night, windows tinted, slowing just long enough to stare at the fields. The uncertainty ate at me more than her shouting ever had, because it wasn't the noise that scared me, it was the silence. Silence meant she was scheming. Days turned into a week. The wheat ripened, heavy and gold, bowing under its own weight. I spent long hours in the field, hands brushing the stalks, boots leaving prints in the dust. Red shadowed me, steady and watchful, like he could feel the shift too. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped low and painted the land in fire, the sheriff's truck rolled into my drive. Gravel crackled under his tires. He stepped out slow, hat pulled low, eyes serious. "Got something you should know," he said. Karen had filed another complaint. This time not about Red, not about livestock, but about me. She claimed harassment, claimed I was targeting her, claimed she was living in fear of her unstable neighbor. I couldn't help it. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound that scraped my throat. She nearly got a boy trampled just to frame me, and she's scared of me. The sheriff sighed. "It won't hold. We've got the footage, but I figured you should hear it from me before the rumor mill twists it worse." I nodded, my chest heavy. It wasn't the complaint that stung. It was the realization that she'd never stop, never admit fault, never lay her pride down long enough to see the wreckage she left behind. That night I sat on the porch long after the stars came out. The boards creaked under me, the air smelled of hay and earth, and Red's bellow rolled across the dark like a drumbeat. I thought about Karen's face at the hearing, pale and cracking under the weight of truth. I thought about her house, lit up too bright, curtains always twitching. And I realized something. She wasn't fighting me anymore, she was fighting herself. The next morning, the news broke without me lifting a finger. Karen had resigned as HOA president. The official word was health reasons. The real word, whispered from porch to porch, was humiliation. Too many eyes had seen the footage. Too many neighbors had started asking questions about her leadership. She didn't step down willingly. She was shoved down by the weight of her own lies. I didn't celebrate, didn't crow about it to Fletcher, didn't gloat to Linda. I just went about my day, fed the bulls, walked the fences, brushed dust off my boots. Because victory isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet return of peace. Weeks passed, the letters stopped. The phone stopped ringing. The board kept to itself, quieter than they'd ever been. And when Karen drove past on the road, because now she stayed on the road, she didn't look my way, not once. But Red never forgot. Even now, when I walk out at dawn, the dew wet on my jeans, the air sharp with the smell of earth, he struts the field like a king. He's calmer these days, but his eyes are still sharp, always watching, always ready. He remembers what it means to protect what's his. And so do I. Sometimes I think about that boy she shoved through my gate. How scared he looked, how shaky his voice was when he parroted her words. He was a pawn in her game, too young to know better, too scared to resist. And that thought is what keeps me from hatting her entirely. Because hate is heavy, and I've carried enough heavy things in this life. Instead, I remember the lesson she taught me, without meaning to. That fences aren't just for keeping animals in. They're for keeping arrogance out. That some people only respect what pushes back harder than they do. And that dignity isn't something you beg for in letters or hearings. It's something you hold on to when the whole world tells you to let go. When neighbors stop me now, their voices are softer. There's respect in their eyes, even if they don't say it. They've seen what happens when you don't back down. They've seen what happens when truth holds steady against lies. And every time I scratch Red's head, feel the rough hair under my palm, I smile. "Good boy," I whisper. "You did what no warning sign could." Because in the end, it wasn't me who stopped Karen. Not the sheriff, not the county, not the HOA. It was a bull. A simple, unyielding creature who asked for nothing more than grass under his hooves and space to defend it. Karen will keep her distance now. Maybe forever. Maybe one day she'll pack up and move, or maybe she'll stay pretending nothing ever happened. Either way, it doesn't matter. My land is mine again. My peace is mine again. And if she ever forgets, well, Big Red will be waiting. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.